I'm Catherine Durose, Professor of Public Policy and co-director of the Heseltine Institute for Public Policy, Practice and Place, and lead for the Women at Liverpool network. And you're listening to the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode. In today's show, we chat with Catherine about her motivation to set up a new women's network at the University of Liverpool and what that looks like in practice. We hope you enjoy. Hi Catherine, we're really pleased to be speaking with you today and we're delighted to speak to you about the value of women's networks. But before we get started, could you please tell us a little bit about your background and how you arrived at the position that you found yourself in today?
Yeah, hi Matt and Sally, thanks for having me. I joined the University of Liverpool about 18 months ago, and my position is as Professor of Public Policy and co-director of the Heseltine Institute. Previously I was at the University of Birmingham, which I was there for around a decade, and prior to that at De Montfort University in Leicester, and I did my PhD at the University of Manchester. So I guess kind of 20 years into an academic career, it's all right to say that I'm a career academic, but in some ways that's kind of quite a surprising thing to say, because I'm the first and only person in my family to go to university. So that I've ended up as this kind of career academic is maybe not what I would have predicted or thought of. And I guess in some ways it's that experience of feeling a little bit othered or a bit unusual in the academy that has informed what we're going to be talking about today, and the value of being able to kind of share experiences and build community amongst academic women who are kind of trying to navigate the similar kind of challenges that I am. And I suppose on a more personal level, I'm a mum to a little girl, Edie, who's now shockingly 7. I don't know how she's has gone so quickly. But we live over in Manchester, which is also like where my family's from and where I was brought up.
So it's an impressive career. Do you ever feel institutionalized into higher education as a result of that?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I in one sense, I suppose there's a yes and no, and I think that's probably the same for everybody. In one sense, I think that your practice as an academic is a craft. The things that you're kind of asked to do, whether that's research, writing, teaching, kind of a lot of my role is around kind of policy engagement. I do think that that's a craft. That's something that you craft and develop over time. And so I think there's in one sense, there's an institutionalized kind of perspective on that. I think universities are, at my previous institution, we used to refer to things as like normal at Birmingham or normal at Liverpool. And I do think universities are quite unusual institutions in the sense that, well, they're large and complex, but they're also, what they're trying to do is quite distinct in the broader kind of economy and society. They have a distinct role. But I do think it's really important as well to just have a kind of perspective on that. And I think, a lot of academics, I think, are very much defined by their work and their research interests. And I think I am to an extent, but I think it's also, and this is so one of the things that I think I want to talk about today really is about how do you kind of keep perspective on that, and perspective on the academy and the demands it makes, and how do you, I suppose, retain your kind of authentic self of like who you are as a person, and recognize that that's actually, really what also strengthens and enhances your practice as an academic. So I guess part of it is about recognizing the strengths of the institution, but not perhaps being defined by it.
So moving on to the sort of main motivation of us meeting with you today, you launched the Women at Liverpool network in March 2023. So we're coming up for the anniversary of the network fairly soon. Can you tell us a bit more about the network and your motivation for setting it up?
Yeah. So Women at Liverpool is designed to be a network by and for academic women. It's intended to provide an inclusive space for women across disciplines and across career stages to kind of come together, share their experiences, develop reciprocal kind of peer support, and then also to kind of act collectively about issues that, affect career development and in navigating what it means to be a woman in the academy. So really we see this as a kind of women-centered space. We want it's primarily for academic women, but it's open to colleagues in professional services. It's open to colleagues who are trans, non-binary, who are comfortable in women-centered spaces. So that's the network. And I guess where did it come from? So joined the university relatively recently, about 18 months ago. The Heseltine Institute has a kind of institution-wide remit. So a crucial part of my job really was building relationships and building networks. But I was also really interested in building community at Liverpool. And I suppose that the network was kind of motivated by a few different things. One is that I think in my career, I think I've really benefited from having great friends, peers, mentors that have really helped facilitate and shape my career. And now I'm in a senior academic position. I'm really interested in kind of like paying that forward and offering that kind of reciprocal support to other women. At my previous institution at Birmingham, I developed a network that in a way provided a blueprint for women at Liverpool that was really well received. We ran it for about 8 years, and then it informed a women's network being launched officially by the university. So I kind of felt confident that I'd kind of had a go at doing this before. And when I looked at what was available in the kind of staff equality network space here at Liverpool, there was lots of provision for women, but a lot of it was quite specific. And that's not to say that it's not valuable, because I really think it is. But what I felt there was a space for was an opportunity to bring women together across disciplines, because I think it can be so useful to talk to the people that are outside your immediate space. Like, I think you gain a lot from getting different kinds of perspectives, and also across career stages. And I'm conscious that particularly for early career researchers, it's often not easy to come into contact with really senior people that aren't immediately in your kind of line management arrangements, but there's really great value in doing that. So I just felt there was this space to do something that was cross-disciplinary, cross-career stage. This is for academic women to meet in ways that gets us out, I suppose, of the usual silos.
Yeah, definitely. I like anything that gets us out of silos. It's interesting that so you've had previous experience of setting up a similar group. Then was that Birmingham you did that in? Yeah,
so it was at the University of Birmingham. Similarly, it was something that I actually set up quite quickly if I joined the organisation. And it was like a throwaway comment that was made in a meeting that I was in that was I just felt didn't kind of take seriously some of the challenges that I think women face in navigating the academy. And so it was with a colleague that we were like, right, okay, let's do something. And initially we just had like a lunchtime meeting. We didn't have like a tight agenda around it. And then over time, a kind of form emerged of, this is by and for academic women. We want this to centre women's lived experiences. So all the events and activities that we've had, or most of them, are about really candidly sharing your experiences. And that was characterised in the launch event that we did here. It was on International Women's Day last year.
Right.
And that was about looking at women members of the professoriate. So we had like a diverse panel that was women that had got to chair in different ways, right? So the kind of traditional research route with people who'd gone on teaching and scholarship contracts, people that had gone into industry. And I felt like you just had that allows you, one, I think it helps people to feel validated and legitimated in their own experience. I think it opens up a space for a different kind of candor. And so we got some really great, I think people shared really great insights in that panel, but we got really interesting questions that weren't the kind of questions that I think you can go and ask your line manager. So they were things like, I remember one early career researcher said, I feel really overwhelmed about my workload. I can't get all of this done. What techniques have you used to be able to, and there was a brilliant answer from one of the panel that was basically like, you need to think about what can be good enough and where do you really need to like channel what needs to be excellent. And I just felt that was such a great like permission giving comment that you wouldn't really get from a line manager in quite that way. No. And I think that was that. Yeah. So it's that kind of interaction that really the network's kind of trying to foster, and that was very much the style of it in a previous institution.
Yeah, it sounds brilliant. I mean, Sally's mentioned that the network's been in place at Liverpool for a year now. So you've just touched on some of those highlights and, breaking out of silos, which is a great thing. Is there any other highlights that come to mind for the last 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so, I mean, I obviously thought this was a good idea. Sally thought that this was a good idea. And it was just brilliant that we did almost immediately have like a really good reaction to it. Like a lot of people have signed up to our events, and also a lot of people have so I think what that suggests is that the network kind of does really plug a gap, and it does meet a need that sometimes until you surface that, you don't know that that's actually really what people want. And, really across our events, we've just had a really nice reaction from, well, across disciplines and across career stages. And I think there's been value given to that kind of reciprocity. So all the things that we've kind of done so far. So I mentioned our like launch event. We also did a session that was about speed mentoring. So we got a group of senior women who kind of acted as a mentor for this 90-minute session, and early career researchers could come, move around, and basically get some off the record feedback on what their issue or dilemma was. And some of it was about I want to go for promotion, but I don't feel like I'm being taken seriously. Or I remember somebody came and talked about working in a really male-dominated environment and in their discipline. And someone else talked about, I've had successive postdocs and how do I get off this postdoc track? Or I'm coming back to work after having a baby and I want to work in a different way, and how do I do that? And yeah, I think the session worked really well by having a group of women who were there in a professional capacity, but were there in a human, personal capacity as well, and able to sort of really give advice. Again, there's those kind of questions that's difficult to answer, or difficult maybe to kind of feel like you can raise in a professional setting. So yeah, and there's been some really nice appetite from people who've come along to the sessions or heard about the network, that they also want to get involved in organizing things. And so in terms of like what's coming up next year, it is looking like it's being kind of meaningfully owned by the network rather than by me.
So you just mentioned some plans for next year. That mentoring sounds fantastic, by the way. Have you looked at the possibility of reverse mentoring as well, where you do that sort of the other way around, for maybe in your plans for 2024?
That's interesting. There was a thing on I must be a glutton for punishment, but I listened to the Today program on Radio 4 a lot, and there was an interesting piece about that, about how you can do that sort of reverse mentoring, and the emphasis was on how engagement with people at an early stage of their career can offer a kind of connection, whether it's sort of to the zeitgeist, etc., or just, I think in academia that would be really useful. And that was one of the things that we were conscious of in the professorial session. One, not to kind of valorize that there's only one way to have a career, but also that to have a panel of women who were professors on permanent contracts that were well paid, in a way is anomalous in a sector that is increasingly not characterized, but issues of casualization, like the person I referred to is on that kind of successive postdoc train. And in that sense, I think that shows that there is a lot to be learned from engaging with people at different stages of their careers to really understand some of the challenges that are faced by women within the academy.
We've talked quite a lot today, Catherine, about sort of the positive impact this has had, particularly on early career researchers, like you just said, in terms of thinking about contract types and providing that space for people to ask those challenging questions and interact with role models. Is there anything that, thinking back to the start of your career, is there anything you would tell that version of yourself in terms of tips or things to expect, things to avoid, any useful sort of nuggets of advice you could pass on?
I think that's a really interesting question. So I've got this piece of art in my house that's how should you describe it? I don't know, it's like a tapestry or an applique, but it says cut yourself some slack. And I have that up because I think it's a good reminder on how to do something that I think I've found quite difficult. And I think to kind of recognize that sometimes the pressure that I kind of put on myself to kind of please others, to achieve, rather than just to be. And in some ways, I suppose, as a chair, I kind of have, or as a professor, I get to have more permission to kind of do that once I've reached a certain level. But I think for a lot of people, in academia, I read a great blog that someone had put together during the pandemic about the experience of being an academic, and it said most academics are goal-oriented people pleasers, and I was like, oh my god, am I a goal-oriented people pleaser? And then I was like, yes, I think I am. And in some ways, that you can say that served me well, but I think noticing when that doesn't serve you is really important. So I think some of the things that I suppose I would say to kind of early career researchers would be that you don't need other kind of people's permission to set boundaries and to rest and to look after yourself as a person. That a lot of people who go into academia do so out of the love of their research. And I think surrounding yourself by people that inspire you and that, you share their values. And, I think that's been one of the things that's kind of really allowed me to sort of maintain momentum by working with people that, I just feel really inspired by. I think a good thing that I suppose I'd like to see a bit more of is people admitting what they don't know and being and normalizing that. I think that's important. I think one of the things that I've talked about, I think has kind of been a crucial principle underpinning the network, is really actively seeking the advice and support of people who are outside your immediate circle or discipline. I think that's so helpful, and I've really benefited from that at crucial points of my career. Like when the first time I took on like a formal leadership role, I had a mentor at my institution then, and one of their suggestions was going to speak to someone at another institution who did the same role but in a more senior way, and it was absolutely brilliant. And I was like, interested in coming to talk to me. I don't even work at that. They said yes straight away. And I think most people if you got in touch with them and said, looking for some mentoring, I'm looking for some advice, most people say yes. And, I would really encourage that. I think another thing that's really helped me is having people that you can just be off stage with, off message, say what you really think.
Yeah.
I think that's really been really important. And, I hope I've got some of those people now at Liverpool, but certainly got them in other aspects of my network. It turns out I've got quite a list here, but I've got a couple more. So another one was, I think there's a lot in academia about kind of like proving yourself. And I think that's, great, be ambitious and go for things, but also feel like you don't have to keep putting yourself in spaces that you're uncomfortable with. Whether that's carving out spaces that you are comfortable with, whether that's doing that in just a more incremental way. Like, I just kind of felt like I had to say yes to everything and always like be challenging myself, and yes, do that stuff, but you don't have to do that like all the time.
Does that have something to do with the competitive nature of HE, do you think? Does that tie into that? Because I agree. I think people should be able to say, well, no, enough's enough. I've done enough in this particular area, but it feels like it ties into the competitiveness. It ties into that burnout that we see in the sector as well.
Yeah, and I've definitely experienced some of that myself. I do think that there can be a culture in academia that could be described as toxic, and that comes from, I think, in some ways, the nature of the kinds of institutions that we work in. The fact that there isn't a kind of upper limit, you can always be doing more. Sometimes it can feel like quite an individualized culture, which I think can give way to that. And this network is, I think, in part an attempt to create a space that operates on different principles, that is about collectivizing and sharing experiences, and just some of that nurturing that gives you, some of the tools to navigate what can, doesn't always feel like a welcoming environment. And so, yeah, I think it is inspired by that.
Yeah, and I think with some of the network meetings, particularly the informal drop-in meetings, I think they provide space, like you mentioned, around sort of that a chance to be off message and off brand, and kind of if people need to vent a little bit or share that vulnerability a bit more about the experience that they're having. I think it definitely provides that. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you think it's had that sort of it's kind of delivered on that. Yeah, so as I said before, we've been running for a year. We've had some interesting events already. I've mentioned the launch and speed networking. We also did a brilliant set of sessions with a journalist and broadcaster called Steph Power, which was about women sharing their expertise in broadcast media and sort of giving some rehearsal to that. And then we've also had brilliant colleagues. So Vera Petkova from Media and Comms, she initiated this idea of having these informal drop-in sessions that we've experimented with them in different ways, online, in person, themed, open. And they've consistently attracted, like a good number of people and a really rich conversation. So thankfully, Vera's happy to keep going with those this year. And then Nikki Power from the management school, she's initiated these weekly women's writing sessions. So they're basically an opportunity for a group of women. You come together, you meet every week for 8 weeks. You work on your own research, but you'll have a little session at the beginning that's provoked by a short article or piece in the media that somehow relates to academic practice. And they're usually, really productive sessions, but also doing some of that community building work. So we're expanding those this year. Nikki is going to run another session with 15 people, and I'm going to do one as well. And then we're planning a women's writing retreat on campus just after Easter. And then we've got a few things in the pipeline for International Women's Day, which is obviously coming up on the 8th of March. So in that week, we've got two sessions. So one's with Michelle Henning, who's also from Media and Comms, and she's running a women's Wikipedia editathon. So Wikipedia, guess whether we like it or not, is actually a really key platform that people go to when first looking into a topic. And I think it's well documented that it's women are underrepresented both in people who are creating pages and in people who feature in pages. So she's, I think, been along to these sessions held elsewhere and has also done some of this work. So basically, that's an opportunity to come along, address the equality challenge in Wikipedia, but also add to and develop pages for other women who've inspired our research and practice. And that's going to be like a drop-in session running all day. So I think that'll be quite fun. And then we're having another panel session that's about navigating mothering in the academy. So that's going to be kicked off by Laura Ratcliffe and Rachel Ashman, who are from the management school, and they both work in organisational studies, and so they're going to share some kind of cutting-edge research insights into the balance between work and mothering. And then again, we're going to have that panel of women speaking to their experiences of that. So yeah, we've got quite a lot going on at the moment, which is great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a nice full programme.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that using Wikipedia session. We had on the podcast a couple of years ago Dr. Jess Wade, who is a champion in this area. She's been pushing it a lot. Yeah, so she was on the podcast and she was talking to us about her work with Wikipedia and what she's been trying to achieve, and it really aligns to that session. So yeah, I'm glad those two things sort of marry up.
Sally mentioned that, and she was also profiled in a piece that in the Guardian that I read about doing this. So I think it'd be great to share that episode of the podcast, perhaps to people who've signed up to the event, or kind of to help drive kind of interest in it, to sort of show what the kind of background thinking to doing this. That'd be great.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. I mean, just listening to you, Catherine, from listening to what you've been saying about the network and saying about all these events that are coming up, it's really clear that you're providing a really good supportive space for women. Obviously, I hope that male listeners to this podcast and colleagues, my male colleagues in the university, I hope they listen to the podcast. I also hope they, like us, want to see improved gender equality across the sector. So from your perspective, what are the positive things that our male colleagues and allies can do to push gender equality forward, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for asking that question. I mean, interesting, when I was preparing for this, we did get an inquiry, I think, Sally, about whether this was we've had interest from male colleagues about coming along to the events, which I think is great, and we're open to everybody recognizing that this is a women-centered space, and is really focusing on navigating the academy. I mean, I think it's fair to say that a lot of the practices that disadvantage women, or that we might see are kind of gendered, are also not necessarily great for men as well. And so, for example, we can see that there's evidence that family-friendly policies, which I know at Liverpool is really keen to progress with, and there was a great advance in maternity rights and maternity provision at Liverpool last year, which was fantastic to see. But there's evidence that those kind of family-friendly policies sometimes can be undermined by the kind of culture that we've talked about. And so I think it's really important to see that this isn't something that women and other minoritized groups within the academy should feel the burden of kind of tackling. It is something that really need men to kind of step up as well and see this as part of their responsibility. So I think there's a few things. I mean, and some of them are really like little things, but I think they're actually really important. Like I still think that there is an unsaid sense in which we should compartmentalize the professional and the personal. And, as a mother of a young child, that's just not always possible. But it does often feel that it falls to women to kind of challenge when your working life and professional life are in tension. It would be great, for example, to see a male colleague challenging the time of a meeting to say, actually, that's not great for anybody that's doing school drop-off, or that's not great because it lands in half term, etc. And similarly, that might be about being the person in a meeting that counters when something's been said that could be considered to be microaggressive, or where you feel like that classic thing of a woman says something and then a man says it and the man is heard but the woman isn't. It would be great to have men countering that kind of thing. And I think there's also just a really important point that about being reflexive about your own practice and your own way of being, that I think is really, really important. I think some of the kind of personal interactions that women might find challenging within the academy, I think if actually the people who were acting that way were confronted by them, they'd probably be quite shocked and surprised. So I think being able to kind of think critically about how you act and how you are within the academy is something for everybody to think about, not just women. And and there also are kind of I suppose practical things like there are lots of opportunities to come forward and take leadership in this space that not necessarily this role that I have isn't a formal leadership responsibility, but it's something that I kind of saw a gap and that we can do something about, or starting a conversation within your own department. So those are some of the things that I think are just practical.
Some of them are quite small things, aren't they, Catherine? I think the amplifying overlooked colleagues in meetings is something that I think can't be underestimated, how much of a difference it can make, because that's the sort of the setting where we are being assessed by everyone in our teams or our departments in terms of our contributions. And if you can actually help not just necessarily women, but any colleagues who are overlooked, whether it's because they're more junior or any other sort of equality characteristics, it can be quite a simple thing to do, but it can be hugely impactful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that kind of sits, certainly people in senior positions, I think that kind of, being the person that does that, I think that's part of your responsibility. Also looking at, what are the ways in which you can contribute to kind of developing and uplifting others, I think is really important.
So, Catherine, this podcast is called the Developing Practice Podcast, and we like to finish each podcast with 3 or 4 take-home tips for listeners to reflect on in terms of their own practice. So if you could give us a few tips or thoughts in relation to your practice, what would they be?
Thanks, Sally. So I suppose tips or thoughts of what I've learned as a woman navigating an academic career and through building these kinds of networks. I suppose one of them is pay it forward, recognise what it takes to develop an academic career, and really see, in the same way that your research, doing your research outputs or delivering great teaching, that kind of developing others is a really important part of responsibility, and something that my mentor refers to as polishing each other's crowns, right? So she refers to we should see each other as queens, and we polish each other's crowns. And so yeah, I like that idea. Another one is about setting your own boundaries. I think something I've really learned is that the institution will never set boundaries for you. There's always more that you can do, and as well as achieving, you've also got to think that this is a career, and it's how do you deliver over the long term? And I think that's about how do you stay well and set boundaries that allow you to do that. One of the other things that is about kind of keep perspective. I realize that I lose perspective when I'm overworking, or when I'm tired, or when I'm not grounded. And so I think about, how do you do that? And for me, this might not be for everybody, find your own thing. For me, like, increasingly going for a run is one way in which I kind of like gain my perspective back. So I think you said 3 or 4, but I've got 2 more. But one is something I said earlier, which is, I really took to heart when the person said this in our launch event, which was, find when it's okay to be good enough. And I think that's really useful. You can't excel at everything all the time, and there are spaces of when you can do stuff that's good enough. And I think that's really important. And the other thing was about finding safe spaces to reflect, and whether that's about working with people that you feel inspired by, but where you can throw things out there, whether that's about carving out spaces that operate in a collegial way, whether that's about coming along to our kind of network sessions. Find those kind of safe spaces that you can be off message, because I think that's just really valuable.
Oh, really good tips. Thank you for your time today, Catherine.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.